Hiya, how you doing? Right, today, quickie, very quickie. PSUs and transformers and making equipment run on the wrong voltage. That's to say, make it run on the right voltage, but in the wrong country. You know what I mean. You buy an American piece of kit, you can't plug it into the UK mains. You buy a piece of kit destined for Japan, you might be able to plug it into America, but you can't plug it into the UK, and you can't plug it into Europe. So what do you do? What do? You get yourself a method of converting the voltage. Now, trouble with that is there are two things to look for. First of all, what is the voltage? And secondly, what's the frequency of your voltage? If you're in Europe, most of Europe is 50 hertz. If you're in America or South America, USA, it's 60 hertz. Parts of Japan are 60 hertz, part of Japan are 50 hertz, and various other places around the world, well, you know, they're whatever they can get at the time, some of them. So again, you can't guarantee on anything. So when you look at your equipment, if you're going to buy a piece of equipment, you have to make sure what the hertz are. Will they match what you've got in your country? If not, you'll have to get yourself something different to what I'm talking about today. If, on the other hand, you've got 50 hertz and the equipment you're buying says it's suitable for 50 or 60 hertz, then that's fine. Then you've got to look at the watts. Now, the good thing about the watts is they are consistent. 100 watts pulled is 100 watts pulled. But what you've got to be careful of is that you can supply 100 watts. When you've got your transformer or your adapter, you have to make sure that it's got the correct wattage or VA output. Now, watts and VA are supposedly the same thing. A lot of people will tell you they are, because watts is calculated by volts times amps, so VA must be the same as watts. What they don't take into account for is things called power factor, lead and lag on the electricity caused by things like capacitors and stuff. It's way beyond the scope of this video, but I mention it just so that you know that there is something there. It's a bit like magic. It's a bit like black magic. You never know when it's going to come and bite you, but there are ways around it, and the way simply is this. Get yourself a piece of equipment with a VA rating higher than what you're going to try and run from it. Now, if you're running yourself a 100 watt amplifier, which has got 100 watts, it says on the back, there's probably 80 watts actually driven, so it's 100 watts on the power supply. You need yourself a 150 VA or thereabouts transformer or supply. Quite simply, if you go for less than that, you're asking for trouble. It may work, it may not work. But do you want the uncertainty? This is the question. But if you go for something like 150, I'd actually go for 200 VA given the choice, then that will give you a bit of leeway for things to not be quite right. The other thing is that because equipment is vintage, it may not actually be running fully to spec. It may work okay and it may not be a problem, but you may find that it pulls slightly more or slightly less VA than what it's meant to. And the only way to change that is to start getting it repaired, and you don't know there's anything wrong with it. And, well, what's the point? It's not going to do any harm, except that you can't run it off your piece of kit you just bought. Anyway, I'm rambling on here. This is not making a lot of sense, but it should be showing you where the confusion is and what it can be. Now, if I'm going to run something off the wrong voltage for my country, I will buy myself a transformer, a proper transformer. And I was looking on Amazon, there was one for about, it was either £49 or £59, and it was a 2 kVA, 2000 watts. Why would I go for that sort of size? Because, to be honest, it was cheap. At that money, 2 kVA, I could run, I could almost run a kettle off it, but on 2 kVA I could run an amplifier, I could run a couple of pieces of other equipment, and I would know that there would be plenty of spare. And it wouldn't matter what I plugged into it effectively, it would be right. You could go for smaller, like I say, go for at least 50% more than what it says. When it says 100 watts, go for 150 watts minimum. Now, there are many things you can buy which people will tell you are great for working the equipment. These things are travel adapters, which are very small, wall warts. And effectively you plug in to the wall, and what comes out the other side of your wall wart will be roughly the right voltage and roughly the right current. When I say roughly, what you've got to remember is these are switch mode power supplies mostly. They are taking the AC in, they are chopping it up, they are then spitting it out in smaller bits or bigger bits, depending on whether it's a step up or a step down. The problem with this chopped up electricity is that it is exactly that. It is chopped up. It needs to be filtered. It is running at frequencies which may or may not interfere with the equipment that you're running it with. I would never use one of these as a permanent method of powering a piece of equipment. It's not the same as the power supplies that you get with like your laptop, which are switch mode power supplies. They are well made and they're expensive. The stuff we're talking about is what you get from the airport, and they don't cost an awful lot of money, but they are not really rated for long-term use. And your equipment is going to be a bit sensitive. A lot of this stuff, it says, for resistive loads only. That means, well, motors, they sort of count as resistive, and lights. It does not really mean delicate electronics, or electronics which you're trying to get lovely sensitive sound out of. If you make the decision and buy one of these switch mode things, if you buy a really expensive one, it'll be fine. But you're going to pay probably as much, if not more, than you would for the transformer. The benefit of them, the switch mode things, is that they're small and light. You can put them in your bag, you can take the thing abroad. You could run your transistor radio quite happily off one of those, sat in the sun on a Florida beach. Well, except that you've got no electricity on the Florida beach, but you know what I mean. The principle's there. You could sit by the pool, you could plug in your European radio into the American power supply, it would work, and you could listen to American radio. Or you could just buy a radio that runs off batteries. Anyway, the point is that's what it's for. It's for making sure the equipment that you just really can't travel without works when you get to where you're going. Not to be confused with something that you want to actually run at your house permanently. You don't want to be switching it on and off for safety. You just want to plug it in and it works. If you go for transformers, there are two types of transformers. There are what are called Autotransformers, and they are basically one coil of wire which is tapped off and gives you outputs that are different to the input. Or you can get a proper transformer, a normal transformer, one that's got an input primary and an output secondary. That's exactly what you're looking at here. You see these two diagrams. The one on the left is just a simple transformer. That's like the thing we saw on the Amazon's close-up. And the one on the right is an auto transformer. Nothing wrong with auto transformers, but they are not quite as electrically safe, but they are the same effective, and certainly the preferred method of getting AC out to something like an amplifier or some other form of electronic equipment that is not resistive. A nice thing about a transformer is if it goes wrong, normally all that happens is it just stops working. It'll blow a fuse. It won't actually send out nasty volts which will destroy whatever's plugged into it, and they normally don't catch fire as long as you run them within the ratings that they're supplied to. The pros and cons of the two. Isolation transformers are safer. They do not allow the mains live and neutral to come through. They only give you electricity, which means that there is a slight less risk of getting electrocuted. With an auto transformer, you actually get what you put in is what you get out. You put the live in, you get the live out, and it has to be remembered that even though it's 100 volts, if you're in Europe and you're trying to run American stuff, 110 volts, actually, when that's not connected to something, there's 230 volts on it, and it will kill you because it's still connected to the live. It's not unsafe, it's just not as safe as a transformer that does isolation is. There is a thing called an isolation transformer which is very safe and is guaranteed to not allow any of the nasty electricity through, but that's a totally different thing. We used to use them for repairing TVs and stuff, and they're still used in workshops now, and they are used on building sites to stop people getting electrocuted with plug-in power tools. Do not confuse that sort of thing with what we're talking about here. The safety there is much greater, but what I'm talking about here is not danger, but just be careful. When you've got yourself your transformer and the frequency is right and you've plugged it in, make sure you keep it ventilated, do not go burying it, and just keep it available so that you can disconnect it if you need to. I wouldn't suggest you go burying them in walls and things like this. I've seen some people do. Other than that, enjoy your equipment. There is absolutely no reason why you can't run a piece of American equipment in Europe with a transformer, provided it's the right frequency. If it's something that's got an AC synchronous motor inside it, it will have this frequency written on the outside of the unit, probably, and that will tell you that it's a 60 cycles only, and that means that if you run it in Europe, it will run slow. There are ways around that. I'll do that another time if there's enough demand, and it's quite easy. Otherwise, we'll just go with what we've got. That's it. It's just a quick one. Try to explain it. Hope it makes sense. If you don't understand what I'm saying, put comments and ask questions. If you do understand, then great. Enjoy your equipment. Have a safe time, and I'll catch you another time. Don't forget, if you'd like to, if you've got any value from my channel, if you subscribe, you'll get to see the stuff as it comes up. If you hit the bell, apparently they tell you it's coming up. And if you share, it makes life easier for everybody.